She couldn't see the world anymore, but she had one final dream. At a crowded fundraiser in Los Angeles, a blind 12-year-old girl was asked to reveal her biggest wish. No one expected her to say his name, and when Keanu Reeves quietly stood up, the entire room froze, waiting to see what he would do next. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Morning in Los Angeles always came with a rush of movement, sunlight, and noise. But inside the small Harper apartment, everything began with gentle quiet. The first rays of dawn slipped through the thin curtains, brushing against the modest room where Mia Harper slept. At 12 years old, she didn't wake to light the way most children did. Instead, she stirred when the hum of the refrigerator deepened in tone, or when the distant traffic softened into a predictable rhythm. Sounds were her clock, sounds were her compass. Her mother, Rachel, moved around the kitchen with deliberate softness. She knew Mia's hearing picked up even the slightest disruptions, so she lifted the coffee mug, slowly opened drawers carefully, and placed each utensil down as if it were glass. She had learned to shape the morning around her daughter's sensitivity, and though it required effort, she did it willingly. Love had changed the way she existed inside her own home. Mia woke with a small stretch and reached instinctively for the cane beside her bed. Her fingers found the familiar handle warm from the night before. She sat upright, tilting her head toward the direction of the kitchen. The faint clink of a spoon against ceramic told her mother was already preparing breakfast. Mia ran her hand along the textured strip on the wall near her door, following the path she knew so well. She had mapped every inch of the apartment in her mind, not visually, but through touch and memory. Each step was practiced, measured, and confident. Even though she couldn't see the morning sun, she sensed its presence through the warmth that crept across the floorboards. She paused to feel it. She liked moments like these, where her world felt peaceful and manageable. Then, she continued into the kitchen. Rachel turned at the sound of her footsteps, her voice soft. She always spoke like she was soothing a frightened animal, but Mia didn't mind. She liked the kindness in it. Mia sat at the small table and folded her hands. She wasn't hungry yet, but she enjoyed being near her mother in the mornings. It grounded her. While Rachel prepared oatmeal, Mia tilted her head toward the small speaker on the counter. It was one of her most treasured possessions, not because it was expensive, but because of what she played on it. She pressed the raised button until she heard the gentle click, then waited. Keanu Reeves' voice filled the room in a recorded interview. His words came through soft and mellow, thoughtful in a way that made Mia feel like he was speaking directly to her. She listened every morning sometimes to the same clips on repeat. She didn't care about the movies or the action scenes people raved about. She loved the way he spoke. His tone made her feel calm, protected, even brave. Rachel glanced over, watching her daughter lean closer to the speaker with an expression that was almost serene. Moments like this reminded her how young Mia still was, and yet how much she had already endured. To Mia, these recordings were more than entertainment. They were windows into a world she couldn't fully experience visually, but one she could still feel. She could sense the emotion in his voice, the pauses between words, the sincerity behind each answer. She once told her mother that his voice felt safe, like a blanket on cold nights. But beneath Mia's calm exterior was a longing she carried carefully, quietly, almost like a fragile treasure. She kept it close because she didn't want to burden anyone with it. Yet, her mother already knew. She always knew. The morning continued with its gentle rhythm, but something deeper stirred beneath the surface. Mia reached for her bowl when Rachel placed it in front of her, feeling for its warmth before taking the first careful spoonful. She didn't rush. She never did. She listened between bites, letting Keanu's voice fill the quiet spaces in the room. "You always wake up with him," Rachel said softly, trying to keep the mood light. "One day you're going to start quoting every interview he's ever done." Mia smiled, the kind of smile that made her seem older than 12, and "I just like the way he talks," she replied, "like he's not trying to make himself sound important." Rachel nodded. She had thought the same thing. There was something about Keanu that was different from other public figures. He didn't chase attention, didn't try to shape the world around himself. He simply existed with a quiet kindness. She understood why Mia felt drawn to him. For a child living in darkness, a safe voice could become an anchor. After breakfast, Mia slid her chair back and took a slow breath. She felt confident in her small space, where every corner was familiar. Still, each movement came with a mixture of courage and practiced caution. She traced her fingers along the edge of the table, then followed the path to the living room where her small collection of books rested. Not books with pictures or words printed flat, but Braille books she had learned to read with astonishing skill. She placed her hand on one of them, but didn't open it. Her mind was somewhere else. Her mother could sense it. "What are you thinking about?" Rachel asked. Mia hesitated. She wasn't sure whether she should say it, but she felt the pressure of the truth inside her like a rising tide. She lifted her chin slightly as if looking toward her mother. "Mom, can I tell you something?" "Something big." Rachel set down the dish towel and walked closer. She knew this tone. It was the tone Mia used when she needed reassurance. "Always," Rachel said gently. Mia clasped her hands tightly in her lap. Her fingers trembled just a little. "There's something I want more than anything," she whispered. "But I know it's impossible." Rachel's heart tightened. She already knew what was coming, but she let Mia say it herself. Children needed the freedom to voice their desires, even the fragile ones. "I want to hear Keanu sing," Mia said at last. "Not on a recording, not in a movie. I want to hear him sing in real life. Just once." Her voice wavered. She breathed through it. "I know he almost never sings. People say he's shy about it. And I know he mostly plays bass, not vocals. But even just one song, I want to hear it with my own ears before my hearing gets worse." The last part slipped out unintentionally. She hadn't meant to say it, but it was true. The doctors had warned her that the same condition affecting her vision could eventually touch her hearing too. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was possible. Too possible. Rachel knelt in front of her daughter. The sunlight now fully illuminated the room, but it felt meaningless. She took Mia's hands in her own. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice firm but warm, "you're allowed to dream, even the impossible ones." Mia bit her lip, fighting emotion. "Do you think it's silly?" "No," Rachel whispered. "I think it's beautiful." But inside her heart ached. How could she protect her daughter from a dream that might never come true? Mia leaned into her mother's arms, resting her head against her shoulder. She didn't cry. She just breathed quietly, holding the hope she was almost afraid to keep. Rachel stroked her hair, torn between wanting to promise the world and knowing she couldn't. She could only hold her daughter and let the moment be real, even if it hurt. Later that morning, Rachel prepared to leave for work, while Mia settled into her favorite spot on the couch, a small cushion worn down by years of use. She ran her hands along its edges, grounding herself. The sounds of the apartment filled the silence in gentle waves, the ticking wall clock, the hum of passing cars, the distant laughter of children outside. These were the outlines of her world, the shapes she understood. But today, something heavier sat beneath her calm expression. The dream she had finally spoken aloud felt too big now, too bright. Saying it made it real, but it also made it fragile. She wondered whether she should have kept it hidden, locked safely away where disappointment couldn't reach it. Rachel walked over and kissed the top of her daughter's head. "You thinking again?" she teased softly. Mia nodded. "Do you think dreams go away if you don't chase them?" Rachel paused before answering. "I think some dreams wait for the right moment," she said, "and some find their way to you when you least expect it." Mia considered that quietly. She didn't know whether her dream could ever reach her, but she held on to her mother's words like a small thread of hope. The next day began with a different kind of energy, something Mia felt the moment she stepped into the nonprofit center for visually impaired children. The center always buzzed with soft conversation and small footsteps. But today, there was an undercurrent of excitement running beneath every sound. Volunteers moved quickly, carrying boxes, testing microphones, adjusting chairs. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and newly cleaned floors, signs that something important was being prepared. Mia walked beside her mother, her cane clicking lightly against the tiled floor. Each tap gave her a sense of direction. Each echo helped her map the hallway. Though she couldn't see the flurry of activity, she could hear its rhythm. It was faster, sharper than usual, filled with shifting movement and occasional bursts of laughter. She tilted her head, trying to understand the shape of the day. "What's happening?" she asked. Rachel squeezed her shoulder. "The staff is getting ready for tomorrow's fundraiser. They've been planning it for weeks." Mia nodded, listening. The fundraiser meant something to the center. She remembered the conversations about new programs and medical research needing financial support. She also remembered the teachers talking gently about how advances might one day slow the progression of vision loss for kids like her. The event theme, Hope You Can Hear, had been chosen to honor children who navigated the world through sound. As they entered the main room, the center's director, Mr. Lawson, approached them. He was a tall man with a warm voice and a way of speaking that made children feel respected. When Mia heard his footsteps, she recognized him right away. "Good morning, Mia," he said. "I'm glad you're here." She smiled politely. "I can tell it's busy." "It is," he admitted. "We have a big night ahead of us, and I was hoping to talk to you about something important." Mia felt her stomach tighten. Important usually meant attention, and attention made her uneasy. She preferred the quiet corners of the center where she could listen to music or practice reading without anyone watching her. Still, she nodded. Mr. Lawson crouched slightly to make his voice level with hers. "You know how much this fundraiser means to our programs. We want people to see what their support can do. We want them to understand our students, not just the challenges, but their strength." Mia remained still waiting. "I would like you to speak tomorrow night," he said gently. "Just a few words about your journey, your courage, your hope." Mia's breath caught. Her fingers wrapped tightly around her cane. She didn't dislike people, but crowds made her nervous. The idea of standing on a stage where hundreds of unseen eyes were pointed at her filled her with a quiet dread. Rachel spoke softly. "It's your choice, sweetheart." Mr. Lawson added, "Your story could inspire people to support the research that might help children just like you." Mia swallowed hard. She didn't want to disappoint anyone. She didn't want to be the reason someone else didn't get help. I can try," she whispered. "That's more than enough," he replied. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder before walking away to continue preparations. Mia let out a slow breath. She wasn't sure she was brave enough for the stage, but she was determined to try. She didn't know her world was about to change even more before the day ended. After agreeing to speak, Mia spent the rest of the morning trying to steady her nerves. She sat in the music room while a volunteer tuned a small keyboard nearby. The gentle tones helped her breathe easier. She traced the edges of her Braille note cards, imagining what she might say. Each bump beneath her fingertips reminded her that words had texture, shape, and power even when she couldn't see them. As she sat quietly, she listened to the sounds of the center. A group of younger children practiced orientation exercises in the hallway, their canes tapping playfully as they laughed. A volunteer guided them, offering gentle encouragement with every step. Their joy filled the building, and it made Mia smile. She knew each of them understood the same kind of fear she carried. They all lived with uncertainties, but they also lived with hope. Around noon, Rachel returned from a short meeting with the staff. She approached Mia with slower steps than usual, the kind she used when she had something important to say. Mia picked up on it immediately. She could always sense changes in her mother's emotions before a single word was spoken. "Mom," Mia asked, "is everything okay?" Rachel took a long breath before answering. "There's something you should know about tomorrow night." Mia lifted her head, attentive and slightly worried. "The organizers invited a special guest to the fundraiser," Rachel said gently. "Someone who supports charities like this one. Someone who tries to stay private." Mia assumed it was another donor or maybe a public figure who occasionally lent their name to causes. But something in her mother's hesitant voice made her sit up straighter. "Who is it?" she asked. Rachel hesitated. She didn't want to overwhelm her daughter with excitement she couldn't control, but keeping it a secret would be impossible. "It's Keanu Reeves." Mia froze. For a moment, no sound came out of her mouth. Her fingers tightened around her cane until her knuckles ached. She felt her heartbeat rise, thumping loudly in her ears. Every thought in her mind scattered like leaves in the wind. "He's coming here," she whispered. "Yes," Rachel said. "He was invited as a guest. He won't be performing or giving a speech. They said he doesn't want attention. He just wants to support the fundraiser quietly." Mia felt the room tilt. Her breath grew shallow, and she pressed her free hand over her chest as if to calm the wild fluttering underneath. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think he'll say anything or talk to people?" Rachel knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, there's no way to know. He's just attending. No photos, no interviews. He prefers to stay in the background." Mia nodded slowly, but her thoughts raced too fast to catch. Keanu Reeves. The voice she listened to every morning, the person whose calm tone brought her comfort, would be in the same room as her, close enough to hear him breathe, close enough to hear his footsteps, close enough to know his presence was real. A tiny spark of hope rose inside her, bright and dangerous. It wasn't a childish wish anymore. It felt like a possibility, even though she didn't dare say it out loud. Rachel watched her daughter carefully. She recognized that spark all too well. It was the same spark Mia had tried to hide that morning when she confessed her dream. "Let's just be grateful he's coming," Rachel said softly. But even she knew it was too late. Hope was already alive in Mia's heart, and hope once awakened never stayed small. That evening back at the apartment, Mia sat on the couch with her knees pulled close to her chest. She replayed her mother's words again and again, trying to imagine what it would feel like to be in the same room as the man whose voice had comforted her through some of her darkest moments. She traced the wooden frame of the couch, absent-mindedly grounding herself through touch. Rachel watched her from the doorway, torn between joy and concern. She didn't want to dampen Mia's excitement, but she also feared the disappointment that could follow if nothing happened. She walked over and sat beside her daughter, letting the quiet settle. "You're thinking about tomorrow," Rachel said softly. Mia nodded. "I'm trying not to hope too much." Rachel placed an arm around her shoulders. "Whatever happens tomorrow will still be meaningful. You'll help a lot of people just by speaking." Mia leaned gently into her mother's side, comforted but still overwhelmed by the swirl of emotions. She knew she needed to focus on her speech, yet her mind kept drifting to the possibility she couldn't ignore. Keanu Reeves would be there. She wasn't sure what that meant, but her heart refused to let it go. The rehearsal for the fundraiser took place the afternoon before the event, and the nonprofit center felt different from usual. The room was filled with soft footsteps, scattered conversations, and the faint echo of children practicing their parts on stage. Volunteers adjusted microphones, tested the lighting, and guided kids through their movements. Despite the buzzing energy, there was also a sense of calm in the air, the kind that came from people working together for a shared purpose. Keanu Reeves entered without ceremony. No entourage, no announcement. He slipped through the side door wearing a dark hoodie, black jeans, and a pair of old boots. His hands were tucked into his pockets, and his shoulders were slightly hunched, as if he hoped the posture would keep him from being recognized too quickly. He preferred moments like this, quiet, meaningful, away from flashing cameras and loud expectations. A staff member greeted him with a respectful nod, then guided him toward the back of the rehearsal space. Keanu followed silently, listening. He wasn't just observing the room visually, he was absorbing every sound and every breath, letting the atmosphere settle over him. The children's choir was running through a soft melody on stage, their voices delicate and slightly uneven, the kind of honesty only kids could bring to music. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, appreciating the rawness of it. He moved along the edges of the room, allowing others to continue their work without interruption. His presence blended into the background unnoticed by most. That was how he wanted it. He never attended events like this for attention. He came because he believed in the cause and because he understood what it felt like to navigate life with unseen pain. As he walked, something in the far corner of the room caught his attention. A small figure sitting alone, her posture straight, her face tilted slightly upward, as if sensing the space through sound. Mia Harper held a stack of Braille note cards in her hands, her fingers moving across them with slow, anxious repetition. Her cane lay beside her on the chair, ready when she needed it. Keanu watched her without speaking. He saw how her shoulders tightened every time someone walked past too quickly, how she listened intently to the subtle shift of footsteps, identifying distance and direction, not with sight but with sound alone. She practiced her speech by running her fingers over the lines, inhaling deeply each time before starting again. There was a fragile determination in her expression, something that made Keanu's chest tighten. A volunteer approached him quietly. "That's Mia," the volunteer whispered. "She'll be speaking tomorrow night. She's one of our bravest students. She lost most of her vision very quickly, but she never stopped trying. Her spirit keeps everyone going." Keanu nodded, listening carefully as the volunteer continued. "She's been through a lot, but she's optimistic. She tries to stay positive even when it's hard. She has this way of making everyone around her feel braver." Keanu looked back at the little girl. He didn't say anything, but something shifted behind his eyes. A softness, a concern, a recognition that her world was far smaller than it deserved to be. He took a slow breath, then walked toward her. Mia didn't hear Keanu approach at first. She was too focused on the tiny, raised bumps beneath her fingertips, mouthing the opening line of her speech as she rehearsed quietly. Her breathing was controlled but shaky, the kind that came from pushing herself through fear. She wanted to do well. She wanted to help the center raise money. But the weight of tomorrow pressed on her shoulders more heavily than she let anyone see. Keanu stopped a few feet away from her, not wanting to startle her. He waited until she paused to take a breath, then spoke gently. "Hi, Mia." The sound of his voice made her freeze, not in fear, but in recognition so strong that her heart seemed to forget its next beat. She turned her face toward the direction of his voice, her hands tightening around the note cards. "Keanu," she whispered, unsure whether she should believe her own ears. He smiled softly, even though she couldn't see it. "Yeah, it's me. I didn't mean to interrupt." She let out a shaky laugh, a blend of nerves and disbelief. I thought you wouldn't be here until tomorrow. I wanted to see how everybody was doing," he said, "and I heard you were working on something important." Mia swallowed hard, then lifted a trembling hand, slightly unsure if she should reach out. Keanu noticed and stepped closer, offering his wrist gently so she could place her hand on him without fear of misjudging the space. She touched his wrist lightly, her fingers exploring just enough to understand his presence. "You feel tall," she said with a nervous giggle. Keanu laughed quietly, the warmth in his voice unmistakable. "I get that a lot." Her hand slipped back to her lap, but her smile lingered. The moment felt unreal. The man whose voice she listened to every morning, the person she dreamed of hearing sing live, was standing right in front of her. She had imagined meeting him 1,000 different ways, but none of them felt as gentle, as human as this. Keanu pulled a chair close and sat beside her. He didn't try to take her note cards or tell her what to say. He didn't ask her to perform her speech or push her to be confident. He simply existed beside her, quietly offering comfort through presence rather than words. "You practicing for tomorrow?" he asked softly. Mia nodded. "I'm really nervous. I don't like crowds. I can't see them, but I feel them. I feel all those sounds pressing in. It's a lot," I understand, Keanu said. And in a way he did. He knew what it felt like to stand in front of people and feel exposed, even if the world expected him to be confident. Mia continued, her voice dropping slightly. "I want to be brave, for the kids here, and for my mom. But part of me keeps thinking that I'm not the right person to speak. Maybe someone else would be better." Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Can I tell you something?" She nodded. "You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to make people listen," he said. Sometimes the softest voices carry the deepest truth. Mia let those words settle. They warmed her from the inside, easing the tightness in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one ever said it like that." Keanu remained beside her, calm and steady, letting the moment belong to her. He wasn't trying to be a star. He was just a man sitting with a child who needed someone to see her in the way she could no longer see the world. The rehearsal continued around them, but for a few minutes Mia and Keanu were in a quiet world of their own. She took another breath deeper this time, letting some of her anxiety slip away. Just knowing he was there made everything feel lighter, as if the room had expanded and given her space to breathe. Keanu noticed her posture relax, and he felt something soften inside himself, too. There was an authenticity in Mia that reminded him of the fragility children carried without realizing it. She didn't try to impress him or hide her fears. She existed honestly, and he respected that more than anything. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Of course," Keanu answered. "Why did you come here? You could be anywhere else." He thought for a moment. "Because places like this matter," he said. "And because people like you matter, sometimes showing up quietly is the best way to help." Mia smiled. "I like that." A volunteer called her name from across the room, letting her know it was time to rehearse walking onto the stage. She stood, slowly gripping her cane. Keanu didn't move to assist her unless she asked. He respected her independence, but he stayed close enough that she felt safe. Before she left, she turned her face toward him again. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "Yeah," he said. "I'll be here." Her smile widened, small, but full of something bright and trembling. "Okay, that makes it easier." She walked toward the stage, her steps careful but confident. Keanu watched her until she disappeared behind the curtains. Something inside him shifted again, deeper this time. He hadn't expected to feel such a connection, but he did, and he already knew he wouldn't forget her. The night of the fundraiser arrived with a quiet sense of importance that settled over the entire nonprofit center. The courtyard outside glowed with soft amber lights, and inside the main hall had been transformed into a warm, elegant space. Tables were draped in ivory cloth, candles flickered gently in glass holders. An acoustic trio played near the stage, their soft chords floating peacefully through the room, blending with the gentle hum of conversation. Everything had been crafted to create a welcoming atmosphere, calming yet meaningful. Wealthy donors arrived in tailored suits and evening dresses, mingling politely as they found their seats. Many of them had supported the center for years, but most had never witnessed firsthand the emotional resilience of the children who benefited from their contributions. Tonight would show them more than charts and statistics. Tonight would bring them into the quiet battles that children like Mia fought every day. Keanu arrived without fanfare. He wore a simple black blazer, a dark shirt, and the same worn boots he had worn to rehearsal. He slipped into a seat near the back, blending into the dim lighting as if he were trying to disappear into the room itself. Even so, whispers rippled along the tables as people recognized him. They kept their distance out of respect. They knew he was there to support, not to perform. He nodded politely when someone offered a quiet hello, but remained focused on the stage, not the attention around him. His presence was steady, grounded, almost meditative. He listened to every note of the trio's music, letting it settle around him. His thoughts drifted to Mia and the courage she would need tonight. Backstage, Mia stood with her mother in a small holding area, lit only by a single lamp. She wore a pale blue dress that glowed softly under the dim lighting. The fabric shimmered like moonlight when she shifted, giving her a delicate, almost ethereal appearance. Rachel helped adjust the sleeves and smoothed the fabric, trying to keep her own hands from shaking. She could feel the intensity of her daughter's nerves radiating through the air. Mia gripped her cane so tightly that her knuckles pressed white against her skin. She tilted her head slightly, listening to the sounds beyond the curtains. Every voice, every footstep, every whisper created a map of the room in her mind. The size of the audience overwhelmed her senses. The depth of the space, the subtle echo when someone coughed or shifted in their seat, made her palms sweat. "Mom," she whispered, I don't know if I can do this." Rachel placed both hands on her daughter's shoulders and leaned close. You can. You've already done the hardest part. What's that? Showing up, Rachel said softly. Mia breathed in slowly, feeling the air fill her lungs in uneven waves. She wanted to be brave. She wanted to help the center. But the thought of stepping into the lights, of speaking into the vastness of a silent room, made her heart pound against her ribs. From the other side of the curtain, the acoustic trio finished their final piece. The applause was polite but brief. Then came the clear voice of the MC, confident and warm, thanking the audience for attending. And then he said the words that made Mia's entire body tense. Please welcome one of our brightest young students, Mia Harper. The moment Mia heard her name echo through the hall, everything inside her seemed to pause. The air felt heavier, and for a second, she forgot to breathe. Rachel squeezed her hand, grounding her, guiding her forward gently. The backstage curtain brushed softly against Mia's shoulder as she stepped past it, her cane tapping lightly against the floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the hushed room. The gala hall fell completely silent. The only noise came from the soft shuffling of people turning in their chairs to see the small girl making her way toward the microphone stand. The lights weren't harsh. They had been dimmed to a warm glow, but for Mia, even light she couldn't see felt overwhelming when combined with the pressure of so many unseen faces. Her shoes tapped rhythmically on the wooden stage. Rachel walked beside her until they reached the center, then slipped away with one last reassuring touch before stepping backstage. Mia stood alone at the microphone, now gripping her cane in one hand and her Braille note cards in the other. She lifted her face slightly upward, not because she could see the audience, but because it helped her feel taller. It helped her imagine where the people were sitting, where the ceiling rose, where the walls stretched. She took a slow breath. Keanu watched her from the back of the room, leaning forward in his seat. He could feel her fear from across the hall, but he also sensed her strength beneath it. Something inside him tightened with admiration. Mia's fingers trembled over the note cards, and for a moment she lost her orientation. She shifted her weight, trying to calm the rising panic. A tiny cough came from the third row, and the sound helped her realign her sense of direction. She found the microphone again, breathed out, and began. My name is Mia, she said, her voice catching on the first word before steadying. I want to tell you a little about what it's like to lose things slowly. The room leaned in. I wasn't born blind, not completely. I used to see colors. I used to see shapes even if they were blurry. But over time, things started disappearing. First, the edges of things, then whole colors, and then the world slowly faded. She paused, letting the silence settle around her. At first, I thought losing sight meant losing everything beautiful, but my mom taught me that there are other ways to experience the world. I started learning to listen to things more. The way footsteps sound on different floors, the way voices change when someone is smiling, the way music feels like pictures in my head. A soft murmur of emotion moved through the crowd. I'm scared sometimes, she admitted quietly. I won't pretend I'm not. It's hard to feel brave when everything around you keeps changing and you can't stop it. It's hard to feel strong when you wake up and realize you can't remember what blue looks like. Her voice thinned. She steadied herself. But I'm trying. I want to stay brave. I want to keep learning new ways of seeing without my eyes. And I want other kids like me to get the help they need. That's why this center matters. They teach us to live in a world that doesn't always understand us. Keanu felt his breath deepen. Her words struck him harder than he expected. Mia swallowed, gripping her cane a little tighter as she sensed the emotion in the room shift. She continued softly, and even though I can't see any of you, I hope you can hear me. A gentle hush fell over the room as Mia paused. She could feel the stillness press softly against her skin, like the world had leaned closer to catch every breath she made. Her voice returned quieter, but steadier as she continued. When I first came here, I thought people would feel sorry for me, but they didn't. They taught me things. They taught me how to walk with confidence, how to trust my instincts, how to understand the world through what I hear and feel instead of what I see. She shifted her note cards, her fingers brushing each edge with practiced care. I'm still scared of losing more, she admitted. But I'm learning that fear doesn't have to stop you. Sometimes it just means you're fighting for something important. Someone in the front row wiped their eyes. Another clasped their hands tightly in their lap. The room wasn't just listening, it was connecting. Mia drew one last breath. I hope tonight helps kids like me, kids who wake up wondering what they'll lose next or what they might still get to keep. This place gives us hope, and hope is something you can hear even in the dark. She stepped back slightly, unsure if she had finished well, unsure if her voice had been strong enough, but what followed answered her doubt instantly. The audience didn't applaud right away. They simply sat there, absorbing her words, letting the weight of them settle. Then the applause rose slowly, like a wave lifting itself off the ground. Warm, steady, genuine. Backstage, Rachel covered her mouth with one hand, tears slipping free. And in the back of the room, Keanu stood up not because he needed to, but because something inside him insisted on honoring the courage he had just witnessed. The applause from Mia slowly faded, replaced by a warm, reverent quiet that settled over the room like a soft blanket. She could feel it, even without seeing the faces before her. The air felt still expectant, almost trembling with emotion. Rachel watched from backstage, pressing both hands against her chest as if trying to steady her heart. She had never been more proud of her daughter, but she also sensed something else, an invisible shift in the room, something fragile and powerful taking shape. The MC stepped back onto the stage with a gentle smile. His voice carried a different tone, now softened by admiration and a hint of awe. Thank you, Mia, he said, turning toward her. Your courage means more than you know. Mia bowed her head slightly, unsure how to respond. Her hands tightened around her cane again, grounding her. She felt the vibrations of the wooden stage beneath her feet, the faint rustle of clothing as the audience leaned forward to listen, and the quiet hum of lights overhead. All the sounds blended together into a living map of the moment. The MC hesitated for a brief second. He was supposed to move on to the next segment, but something about Mia's vulnerability, her honesty, her openness tugged at him. He wanted to give the room one more glimpse into her spirit. His next words weren't planned. They weren't scripted. They rose from impulse, shaped by the emotion hanging heavily in the air. Mia, he said gently, may I ask you just one more question? Mia stiffened. She hadn't expected anything else. Her breath caught in her throat. Still, she nodded. Yes. The MC swallowed. He felt the weight of the entire room shift with him, leaning closer, listening. What is your biggest dream? The question hung in the air like a suspended note, clear and dangerous in its simplicity. The room froze. Every whisper evaporated, every chair stilled. Even the trio backstage stopped moving their instruments. Rachel felt her knees weaken. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress. She knew exactly what was coming, and she wasn't sure whether she wanted it spoken aloud. Keanu, sitting in the dim back row, lifted his head. His expression remained calm, but something inside him tightened. He didn't know why he suddenly felt nervous, but a quiet tension crept into his chest. Mia opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wasn't expecting this question. She had prepared a speech about fear, about courage, about losing her sight. But her dream, her deepest longing, was something she guarded carefully, something she had shared with almost no one except her mother. The silence stretched. The audience waited, with breath held, heart suspended. Mia's voice came out soft at first, like a fragile whisper. My biggest dream. She paused, swallowing the lump forming in her throat. Her fingers twitched against her cane. My biggest dream is something I know may never happen. A murmur rippled through the room, gentle, curious, protective. Mia lifted her face, aiming toward where she imagined the audience might be sitting, letting her words reach them clearly. I want to hear Uncle Keanu sing, just once, with my own ears. The words fell quietly, but they struck the room with the force of something pure. Gasps broke the silence, not sharp, but tender, like people had witnessed something precious. No phones lifted. No one reached for a screen. Every person felt the sacredness of the moment. And somewhere in the back row, Keanu Reeves froze. For a long moment, Keanu didn't move. He sat perfectly still, his hands resting loosely in his lap, his gaze fixed on the small figure, standing alone under the warm lights of the stage. Her voice still echoed through him. He felt it in a way he wasn't prepared for, raw, honest, unfiltered. The kind of truth that bypassed the mind and went straight to the heart. He lowered his head slightly, absorbing the weight of her words. He thought about the times he had been asked to sing publicly, and how he always stepped away from the spotlight. Singing was private for him, something gentle, not meant for big stages or crowds. But this wasn't a request from a crowd. It wasn't about fame or performance. It was a plea from a child whose world was getting smaller by the day. In the front rows, several donors pressed their hands to their mouths. Some blinked against the emotion misting their eyes. Others leaned forward, unable to look away from the extraordinary courage it took for a 12-year-old girl to speak her dream so plainly. Rachel stood frozen backstage, every part of her trembling. She had prayed Mia wouldn't say it. She had prayed the moment wouldn't come. But hearing those words spoken aloud, hearing her daughter reveal the most fragile corner of her heart, brought a sharp ache that was equal parts pride and fear. She wanted to protect Mia from disappointment, yet she also knew that truth had a way of demanding to be spoken. The MC himself stood speechless, the microphone hanging loosely in his hand. He hadn't expected such an answer. He had asked the question gently, impulsively, driven by curiosity and compassion. But now he understood the enormity of what Mia had revealed. He stepped back, giving Mia the space she needed. Mia stood perfectly still, her small shoulders lifted and fell with each shallow breath. She couldn't see the audience, but she could feel the shock, the softness, the sudden tremor in the space around her. She sensed people shifting in their seats, their breaths catching. Her hearing had grown so sensitive that even emotional silence had a texture of its own. She didn't regret saying it. She regretted nothing. But she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected, like she had just handed her dream to the world and hoped it wouldn't break. After a few seconds that felt like minutes, the MC found his voice again. That is a beautiful dream, Mia," he said quietly, his tone filled with genuine emotion. "Thank you for sharing it with us." But the room's focus had already shifted. Every head turned toward Keanu, not with pressure, not with demand, but with an unspoken question suspended in the air. What would he do? Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't look embarrassed or overwhelmed. He simply continued to sit there, still and thoughtful, as if searching for the right way to exist in this moment without overshadowing the child on stage. He wasn't prepared for this. He had walked into the event believing he would sit quietly in the back, offer support, and leave unnoticed. He never expected to be called into the light. Not like this. Not for something so intimate. No bass, no band, no preparation. Just a fragile dream that only he could answer. Mia stood in the center of the stage, unsure if she had said too much. The silence that followed her confession felt vast and heavy, stretching out around her like an invisible ocean. Her hand tightened on her cane, and she fought the instinct to step backward to retreat from the vulnerability she had just revealed. But she stayed where she was, letting the moment settle. From backstage, Rachel held her breath. She didn't dare move. She didn't dare speak. She could only watch her daughter stand beneath the lights, exposed yet unbelievably brave. The audience remained still, not a single rustle of clothing, not a single tap of a phone. No one dared break the sanctity of what Mia had created with her honesty. Her words had landed gently but powerfully, shaping the room with a softness that felt sacred. Keanu continued to sit motionless, but his stillness carried weight. Inside, his thoughts churned. He remembered the way Mia had practiced her speech with trembling fingers. He remembered how carefully she listened, how she sensed the world through subtle shifts that most people never noticed. He remembered her soft laugh when she told him he felt tall. Those small moments echoed through him now, adding layers to the emotion, tightening in his chest. He exhaled slowly, his eyes remaining on her. He had never been called Uncle Keanu before. The innocence of it struck something tender deep inside him, something he didn't expect. It wasn't a title, it was trust. On the stage, Mia lifted her chin slightly, unsure if anyone would respond, unsure if her dream had drifted into the room and disappeared. But it hadn't. It had landed exactly where it needed to. The silence that followed Mia's confession lingered like a thin thread stretched across the entire room. Every person felt it. Every heart reacted to it. And somewhere in that stillness, something shifted inside Keanu Reeves. It began quietly like a beat of recognition, a small understanding that only he could answer what she had asked. Not as a celebrity, not as a performer, but as a human being who had just been handed a child's fragile hope. He rose from his seat slowly. There was no dramatic gesture, no sudden movement meant to draw attention. He simply stood. But the air changed the moment he did. People sensed it instantly, a collective awareness that something meaningful was about to unfold. A few heads turned in his direction. Others noticed the movement only when those around them began to shift. But no one gasped, no one whispered. They watched him with reverence, as if afraid to disturb the sincerity of the moment. Keanu stepped into the aisle. The path cleared almost naturally. Chairs shifted quietly as people moved aside, not because they were told to, but because something in their hearts nudged them to make room. There was no pushing, no scrambling, just soft gestures of respect. Mia heard the change in the room long before she understood why it was happening. The pattern of footsteps grew distinct, measured, steady, firm. Her hearing, sharpened by years of compensating for lost sight, caught the subtle rhythm of each step. Something inside her stirred. Her fingers tightened around her cane. Rachel watched from the side stage, her breath trapped in her throat. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from sadness, but from disbelief. She had hoped for nothing. She had expected nothing. Yet here he was. Keanu walked toward the stage with the quiet determination of someone moving with purpose rather than showmanship. His boots made a soft sound against the wooden floor, each step carrying weight, but no force. When he reached the base of the steps, he paused for a second, inhaling as if preparing himself. For a moment he had not rehearsed, but understood deeply. Then he climbed onto the stage, his movement unhurried and calm. The room held its breath again. Mia sensed someone standing beside her, but she didn't assume. She turned her face slightly upward, searching the air for confirmation. Keanu crouched down beside her so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed by his height. He wanted his presence to feel gentle. "Hi, Mia," he said softly, close enough that the microphone barely caught his voice. She gasped quietly, her hand flying instinctively to her chest. She had heard his voice before in recordings, but hearing it this close, warm, real, alive, made her knees weaken. She gripped her cane tighter to steady herself. Keanu gave her a small smile she couldn't see but could feel through his tone. "Thanks for inviting me," he said, his voice hushed, almost like a secret shared between them. Mia swallowed her throat tight with emotion. She leaned slightly toward where she sensed he was kneeling. "Will you sing?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but it carried across the room like a trembling prayer. Keanu didn't speak right away. He let the question settle inside him. Then he nodded, knowing she would hear it in the quiet shift of his breath. "Yes," he said gently. The room didn't erupt with applause. It warmed. A soft wave of emotion pulsed outward, silent but overwhelming, as if every person had just witnessed something sacred. The warmth that spread across the room was unlike anything Mia had ever felt. She couldn't see the people rising slightly in their seats, couldn't see the soft smiles forming, or the glistening eyes, but she could sense the shift. The air changed texture. It became full thick with emotion, charged with anticipation, so gentle it felt like a blanket draped over the entire audience. Keanu remained kneeling beside her, not moving, not adjusting himself, as if afraid any sudden motion might break the fragile spell surrounding them. Mia clutched her cane so tightly, her hand trembled and her breathing grew uneven. The moment was overwhelming but not frightening. It felt sacred. Her voice came out small. You really will." "I will," Keanu said, barely louder than a breath. "If you want me to." Mia nodded. It was a soft, trembling nod, but it was full of truth. "I want to hear you just once," she whispered. Keanu placed a gentle hand near her back without touching her, letting her feel his presence rather than imposing it. He knew she relied on subtle cues, breath warmth, stillness to understand her surroundings. He offered himself quietly without pressure. From backstage, Rachel pressed both hands over her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks freely now. She watched her daughter stand on a stage she could not see. Facing a moment she never dared believe would happen, her heart swelled with gratitude, so intense it hurt. The MC stepped aside, his hands slightly shaking. He had hosted dozens of events, spoken to crowds larger than this one, but he had never witnessed a moment like this. He could feel the audience connected by a single thread, all waiting without expectation, only reverence. Keanu lifted his eyes toward the audience briefly. He wasn't looking for approval. He wasn't looking for permission. He simply took in the faces before him, faces softened by empathy, stilled by the weight of the moment. There was no band to support him, no bass guitar to hide behind, no spotlight meant for performance, just a microphone, a room of strangers, and a child who had placed her trust in him with absolute purity. He stood slowly, making sure Mia sensed every shift, and guided her hand gently toward the microphone so she would know its position. Then he moved beside her, close enough that the mic would catch both voices, if needed far enough that she still felt independent. Mia lifted her chin slightly, listening to him breathe. It steadied her. She needed that steadiness, because the moment felt so surreal, she feared she might float away from it. Keanu exhaled softly, and the entire room leaned in. "You ready?" he asked her. She let out a small, shaky laugh. "I think so." Her answer wasn't confident, but it was honest, and that was enough. Keanu placed one hand lightly on the top of the microphone, anchoring himself. He didn't need to announce anything. He didn't need to prepare the crowd. He simply prepared his heart for what he was about to give. This wasn't about performance. This was a gift. Mia's dream. His promise. A moment born from bravery and met with kindness. Keanu looked at her one more time, even though she couldn't see him. He wanted her to feel the sincerity behind what he was about to offer. Then, slowly, he drew a breath, letting the silence stretch, as if granting the room one last peaceful second before everything changed. Keanu stood still for a moment, letting the breath he had taken settle into something steady. Mia felt the air shift beside her, sensed the quiet readiness in him. Her heart fluttered, not in fear, but in awe. She had dreamed of this moment, shaped it in her imagination countless times, yet nothing compared to the reality of standing beside him now. The audience waited without a single murmur. Even the lights seemed gentler, as if dimming themselves in respect. The whole room leaned on the edge of a moment that felt suspended in time. Keanu lowered himself to one knee again, so his voice would reach her clearly before it reached anyone else. "You're safe," he whispered. "I'm right here." Mia swallowed her grip on her cane, easing just a little. "Okay," she whispered back. He rose again, lifting his face toward the microphone, but before he began, he turned slightly toward Mia. "This is for you," he said softly. Those 4 words wrapped around her like warmth. She held her breath, waiting. And then he nodded a subtle gesture the audience barely caught, but one Mia felt through the shift of air. Keanu Reeves was going to sing. A ripple passed through the room. It wasn't noise. It wasn't applause. It was emotion moving from person to person like a gentle wave. People recognized how rare the moment was. They understood they were not witnessing a performance, but an act of compassion. Mia lifted her chin, listening for the first note. She imagined colors she could no longer see, pictured the shape of sound as it moved. Her heart pounded in anticipation. Keanu inhaled again deeper this time. Then the room turned silent, ready for the gift he was about to give. The room held its breath as Keanu stood before the microphone. The soft hum of the overhead lights faded into nothing, and even the quiet shifting of chairs stopped. Every eye was on him, but he didn't seem to notice. His focus rested entirely on Mia, the little girl standing beside him with her cane held close to her body like a lifeline. She couldn't see him, but she felt him. She felt the air change when he moved. She felt the stillness settle around them. Keanu leaned slightly toward the MC and whispered that he needed only one microphone. No instruments, no background track, no effects. Just a voice, unguarded and real. The MC nodded and stepped back, understanding that the moment didn't need anything more than simplicity. Keanu turned toward Mia again. She sensed his presence and lifted her chin in the direction of his voice. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the breath. He spoke softly. "This song is for you." Those words slipped into her like a warm current, filling the spaces fear had hollowed out. Her fingers trembled around the top of her cane. She didn't smile. She didn't move. She just listened because everything inside her told her this was a moment she would never forget. Keanu inhaled gently. The entire room leaned forward, waiting for the first note. When he began singing Falling Slowly, his voice arrived quiet, almost shy, a sound that floated rather than pushed. It wasn't polished like a professional singer's, it was raw, honest human. Each note carried a tenderness that made the lyrics feel like they had been written for this one moment, for this one child, for this one fragile wish. The room grew so silent that breathing became audible. Someone in the back wiped their eyes quietly. A woman in the front row pressed a hand to her mouth. A few people bowed their heads. The song wasn't loud, but it filled the space with something that felt alive. Mia's face tilted upward instinctively, as though her body knew where the sound was coming from. She held the microphone stand tightly, with her free hand using it to anchor herself, as waves of emotion rushed through her. Her lips trembled first, then her chin, then her breath broke, and tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She didn't try to wipe them away. She didn't let her cane drop. She just let the tears fall, because the sound was everything she had imagined and more. His voice wasn't a recording now. It wasn't filtered or distant. It was real. It was right there, close enough that she could feel the vibrations of every note. Keanu kept singing, unaware of the audience, unaware of the lights, unaware of anything, except the little girl who had asked for nothing more than to hear him. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't try to make the song dramatic. He let the melody be soft, gentle, and truthful. With each line, the words became a promise. The melody became a shelter. And Mia, wrapped in the fragile beauty of the moment, clutched the microphone stand and let herself feel every second of it. Keanu's voice moved through the room like a gentle tide, steady and warm. Each note carried a quiet sincerity that washed over the audience. As he continued the song, the atmosphere thickened with an emotion that felt almost physical, as though everyone in the room was breathing in the same unspoken truth. The melody flowed out of him with surprising softness. People had seen him act, fight, and play instruments, but almost no one had seen him stand alone at a microphone and sing. There was no hint of performance in his expression, no attempt to show confidence or create theatrics. His voice wavered in places not from weakness, but from vulnerability. That vulnerability made the entire moment feel even more intimate. Mia stood beside him, listening as though her entire world depended on it. She felt a small tremor in her chest with every note. Her tears came faster now, slipping down her cheeks in an endless stream. Her body leaned slightly closer to the sound, drawn in by something she couldn't explain. She imagined the shape of the melody, the way she used to imagine colors, soft edges, gentle waves, warm movements across a dark canvas. She opened her mouth as though trying to say something, but the words never formed. All she could do was breathe in the sound, letting it settle inside her. The beauty of it overwhelmed her senses. She felt the song and the vibrations of the microphone stand beneath her fingertips in the air, moving against her skin in the quiet shifts of Keanu's breath between lines. Keanu noticed her trembling and softened his tone even more, letting the lyrics fall like whispers. He wasn't singing for the room. He wasn't singing for applause. He was singing for her. Only her. The lines of the song drifted upward, filling the high ceiling of the hall with gentle resonance. Not a single person shifted in their seat. Not a cough, not a whisper, not even a deep breath disturbed the stillness. People held their hands to their faces, some shaking with silent emotion. A few donors looked down at the floor, visibly struggling to contain their tears. Even the staff standing along the back wall had gone completely still. The moment had turned sacred. Halfway through the song, Mia lifted her free hand slightly, searching for something. Keanu noticed and moved an inch closer, giving her the sense of his presence without touching her. She found the edge of his sleeve and held it lightly, her fingers curling around the fabric as though afraid the music might drift away if she let go. He didn't flinch. He shifted only enough to let her know it was okay. Her touch anchored him too. He felt a tightness in his chest, a tug deep inside that surprised him with its intensity. The world outside this moment disappeared. There were no cameras, no fame, no expectations, only a child holding onto his sleeve, crying softly while listening to the dream she thought would never come true. He sang the next line with a slight break in his voice. The tremor made the melody even more beautiful. It felt human, real. By the time he reached the final verse, some members of the audience had tears falling openly. Others breathed unsteadily, unable to hide how deeply the moment had touched them. This wasn't a performance. It was a gift of the purest kind, and everyone felt the weight of it. Keanu reached the final lines of the song with a voice that had grown even softer, barely above a whisper. Each word seemed to float gently into the air before dissolving into the stillness of the room. The last note lingered longer than the others, stretching out just enough to let every person feel it settle in their chest before fading completely. The silence that followed was absolute. Mia didn't move. She kept her hand curled around the edge of his sleeve, holding on to the last traces of the melody, as though afraid the sound might slip away forever. Her tears continued to fall, but now they came with a sense of release rather than pain. She lifted her face toward him, her lips parted, trying to speak, but unable to find a voice through the emotion. Keanu looked down at her, his expression soft and full of quiet understanding. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to reassure her that he had meant every word he sang. Across the room, the audience remained frozen in awe. People wiped their faces quietly. A donor gently pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. A man beside her lowered his head, overwhelmed by the tenderness of the moment. Even the volunteers backstage stood motionless, struck by the purity of what they had just witnessed. It felt as if time had paused. Then slowly, without a single cue, the audience rose to their feet. Not with noise, not with clapping or cheers, just a standing acknowledgement of something too sacred for sound. Their silence became its own kind of applause, one filled with respect, gratitude, and shared emotion. And on the stage, Mia released a trembling breath, knowing she had just heard the most beautiful moment of her life. As Keanu reached the final verse, something inside Mia gave way. The emotion she had been holding back, the years of fear, longing, hope, and uncertainty all rose to the surface at once. Her breath hitched sharply. Then the tears returned, this time, stronger, deeper, unstoppable. Her small shoulders shook uncontrollably. The sound of her sobs was soft, but striking, the kind that came from a place far beneath the surface. The audience heard it. They felt it. And the tremble of her voice carried more impact than any shout ever could. Keanu saw her breaking. Without pausing the melody, he placed a steady, gentle hand on her back. His touch was light, barely there, but it gave her something to hold on to beyond the microphone stand. She leaned into it as if it anchored her to the stage. He kept singing. His voice softened even more, turning into something close to a whisper. He wasn't singing for the audience anymore. He wasn't performing. He was trying to hold a child together through the one thing she had asked him for: his voice. The room grew impossibly still. People pressed hands to their hearts. Some lifted trembling fingers to their eyes. A few bowed their heads as though witnessing something sacred, something that demanded reverence. It wasn't just that he was singing, it was the way he sang to her, gently, protectively, with a tenderness that filled the entire hall. The donors began rising to their feet, not in applause, but in a silent wave of emotion. Row by row, people stood breath, caught hearts open. They didn't clap, they didn't cheer. They simply rose as though honoring the strength of the girl and the humanity of the man beside her. Mia leaned forward slightly, her forehead nearly touching the microphone stand. She tried to steady her breathing, but the emotion overwhelmed her again, and another sob slipped out. Keanu's hand stayed on her back, supporting her quietly, guiding her through the final lines. His voice trembled once, just a small break, but it carried a depth of empathy that resonated through the room like a second heartbeat. He finished the song with a final soft note that faded so slowly it felt like a long exhale shared between two souls. Silence followed. Not the heavy silence of shock, but a soft, breathless stillness that wrapped around them. The kind that came after a prayer, after a wish fulfilled, after something too meaningful for words. Mia swallowed hard, her voice barely audible, as she whispered, "Thank you. I'll remember this sound forever." Keanu exhaled slowly, closing his eyes as emotion washed through him. His throat tightened. He tried to fight it, but the weight of her words struck him deeper than he expected. He kept his eyes closed for a few extra seconds, as if trying to collect himself before the world saw what he was feeling. He wasn't the only one struggling. People across the hall stood motionless, holding their emotions in their hands, like something fragile. There was no music to guide them, no speech to break the moment. Only the lingering warmth of a song sung for one child's heart. The sacredness of the moment hung in the air, unbroken. And for Mia, the world had never sounded more beautiful. Keanu kept his hand on Mia's back, steady and warm, long after the final note faded. Neither of them moved. Mia's breathing remained uneven, her body shaking with the weight of emotions she couldn't contain. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't afraid. She was simply overwhelmed by the fulfillment of a dream she had believed would stay locked in her heart forever. Keanu's fingers curled slightly, almost instinctively, offering her silent reassurance. He could feel her trembling beneath his touch, the kind of trembling that came not from sadness, but from a release of something heavy. He drew in a slow breath, the kind a person takes when they are trying not to cry. His eyes remained closed, as if keeping them shut made the moment easier to hold on to. Mia lifted her free hand and wiped her cheek clumsily. Her fingers felt the dampness of her tears, and she let out a soft exhale that carried a hint of disbelief. "I didn't think it would sound so warm," she whispered. "It felt like it wrapped around me." Keanu swallowed hard. Her words pierced deeper than the applause he had received in his life, deeper than any praise or recognition. "I'm glad you heard it," he replied, keeping his voice calm and low. "I'm glad it meant something." "It did," she said, holding the microphone stand as if grounding herself. "It meant everything." Behind them, Rachel stood completely still, unable to move. Her hands trembled in front of her mouth. She had spent years watching Mia fight to adapt to a world she could no longer see, watching her cling to small sounds for comfort. Seeing her daughter standing beside Keanu, hearing him sing for her, felt like witnessing a miracle she never dared ask for. The audience remained on their feet, silent in their reverence. Not a single person reached for a phone. Not one attempted to capture the moment through a lens. They understood instinctively that this wasn't something meant for social media. This was something meant for the heart, something that deserved to live in memory rather than in pixels. Keanu finally opened his eyes. They were glassy, shimmering with tears he refused to let fall. He breathed in, steadying himself. He didn't want to cry, not because of pride, but because he didn't want to shift the focus away from Mia. This was her moment. Her dream realized her emotion filling the room. Mia turned her head slightly, sensing a change in him. She reached out tentatively with her free hand, brushing the air until her fingers grazed his sleeve again. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Her innocence nearly broke him. "I'm okay," he answered with a shaky exhale. "Just moved, that's all." The simplicity in his admission carried more meaning than a speech ever could. He didn't hide his heart. He didn't pretend to be unaffected. He stood there as a man touched deeply by a child's courage and sincerity. And as the audience watched them, they understood that they had witnessed something rare, something pure, something that would remain with them long after the night ended. The silence that followed the end of the song lasted only a breath, but it felt like a lifetime. Then slowly, one person rose to their feet. Another followed, then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was standing. It wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, it wasn't even celebratory, it was reverent. A standing ovation built not from celebrity, admiration, or musical talent, but from the depth of a moment that had touched every heart in the room. People stood with tears on their cheeks, their hands pressed against their chests or clasped in front of them. Some looked down, trying to gather themselves. Others simply stared at the stage, unable to look away from the tender sight of Mia leaning against her microphone stand, recovering from the storm of emotion Keanu's voice had awakened inside her. Rachel couldn't stay backstage any longer. She rushed forward, her steps quick and unsteady. When she reached the stage, she climbed the small set of stairs with trembling hands and moved straight to her daughter. Mia sensed her immediately. She reached out and Rachel wrapped her arms around her without hesitation, holding her tightly. Mia buried her face into her mother's shoulder, her body still shaking with the remnants of her sobs. Rachel stroked her hair, whispering soft reassurances, even though Mia already knew she was safe. The two of them stood together, anchored in a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. Keanu stepped back quietly, allowing the family to have the space they needed. He didn't want his presence to overshadow what Mia was feeling. He didn't want attention or applause or recognition. His role was done, and he felt it in his chest, the gentle ache that lingered when something meaningful had transpired. The donors watched this interaction with growing emotion. The walls they carried into the event, the skepticism or distance or formality, all dissolved in the wake of the moment they had witnessed. Many of them wiped their eyes openly, not caring who saw. Others exchanged glances that carried unspoken promises and renewed purpose. Then, something unexpected happened. People began to make commitments. A man in the front row whispered that he wanted to double his donation. The woman next to him nodded through tears and said she would triple hers. A couple in the center row leaned toward the nonprofit staff, asking for pledge forms. The director, Mr. Lawson, stood stunned as volunteers recorded donations larger than the organization had ever received in a single night. But none of it felt transactional. None of it felt like charity. It felt like people trying to do something, anything, to honor what they had just seen. Keanu watched this quietly from the side of the stage. He didn't smile with pride. He didn't react as though he had caused it. He simply accepted that the world sometimes changed when kindness was allowed to breathe. Without drawing attention to himself, he stepped away from Mia's side. He walked toward the backstage curtains, with his head slightly lowered, trying to keep himself from being noticed. He didn't want to be approached. He didn't want interviews, or cameras, or speeches. He only wanted a moment to breathe, to let the emotions settle inside him. He slipped through the curtain and disappeared from the stage. Behind the curtain, the noise of the hall faded into a soft, distant hum. Keanu stepped into the dim backstage area and leaned against the wall, letting his shoulders drop. The tension he had held in his chest during the performance finally loosened. He took a slow breath, the kind meant to steady a racing heartbeat. Singing for Mia had stirred something deep inside him, something he couldn't put into words. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't joy, it was a quiet ache born from seeing a hope fulfilled. He ran a hand through his hair, grounding himself. Nobody followed him, Nobody intruded. The volunteers nearby sensed he needed space and remained at a respectful distance. A few glanced at him with awe, but they did not try to speak. The moment had changed them too, and they honored it with silence. On stage, the event continued to shift. Donations kept pouring in. Mr. Lawson moved quickly between groups of supporters, overwhelmed by the generosity unfolding before him. People weren't donating out of sympathy. They were donating because their hearts had opened. They were moved by the authenticity of what they had witnessed. They wanted to be part of something bigger than a fundraiser. They wanted to help children like Mia, children whose lives were shaped by courage, fear, and hope in equal measure. Rachel finally loosened her embrace around Mia. She kissed her daughter's forehead and brushed away the remaining tears from her cheeks. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "More than you know." Mia smiled softly, still trembling. She couldn't see the audience standing before her, but she felt the energy. She sensed the warmth filling the room. She knew something significant had happened, something precious. And she felt lighter, like a weight she had carried for years had finally been lifted. When Rachel guided Mia off the stage, the audience made room for them. Some reached out gently to touch Rachel's arm in silent support. Others whispered blessings or wiped their eyes again. The hall felt transformed, as if everyone had shared in a collective breath that cleared away something heavy. Backstage, as Mia approached, Keanu straightened. He didn't step forward, not wanting to overwhelm her. But when she lifted her face and sensed him nearby, she reached out with her hand. Keanu moved just close enough for her fingers to find his. Her hand wrapped around his, gently. "Are you still here?" she asked softly. "I'm here," he answered, voice warm. She smiled, a small, peaceful curve of her lips. "Good," she whispered. "I didn't want the moment to end." Keanu felt emotion rise again, this time steadier, calmer. "Neither did I." He kept holding her hand for another quiet moment, letting her feel that he hadn't disappeared, that the kindness she experienced wasn't temporary or fleeting. Behind them, the fundraiser carried on with renewed purpose. But the heart of the night, the moment that would be remembered, had already happened, and every person who witnessed it left changed. Backstage was quieter than the hall, dimly lit and lined with soft curtains that absorbed sound. Most of the volunteers had stepped aside, giving Keanu the space he needed. He stood near a small table, his hands loosely in his pockets, still grounding himself after the emotional weight of the moment. His breathing had steadied, but the softness in his eyes remained. Footsteps approached from the stage area, light, gentle, careful. They paused, then continued. Mia stood at the entrance to the backstage hallway, her cane tapping softly against the floor. She tilted her head slightly, listening. The faint echo of Keanu's shoes shifting against the ground guided her. She followed the sound until she was close enough to sense him. With her free hand, she reached forward tentatively. Keanu noticed and stepped closer, just enough to let her find him without overwhelming her. Her fingertips brushed his elbow first. She felt the fabric, then the warmth beneath it. She smiled. "I found you," she said softly. Keanu's expression warmed. "You did." She held onto his elbow gently, grounding herself before speaking. Her breaths were slow, still recovering from all she had felt on stage. She lifted her face toward him, her eyes unfocused but full of sincerity. "I couldn't see you sing," she said, "but I felt every word." The honesty in her voice struck something deep inside him. It was the purest kind of gratitude, the kind that asked for nothing else. Keanu swallowed, feeling his chest tighten again in that quiet, familiar ache. He answered softly, "You saw more than most people do." Mia let his words settle. She didn't rush a reply. She simply absorbed them, letting the meaning wrap around her like a comforting blanket. She took a small breath, and when she exhaled, her shoulders relaxed. They moved to a quieter corner backstage, the kind of space where the lighting was low and the noise from the hall faded into distant murmurs. Keanu crouched down so they could speak at the same level. Mia rested both hands on her cane now, but her body leaned slightly toward him, trusting he was close. They spoke privately, unhurried, as though the rest of the world had paused for them. Keanu asked her gentle questions, wanting to understand how she saw the world. She explained that she couldn't see stars anymore, but still loved them. She loved the idea of stars. She imagined them as soft sounds instead of lights, tiny hums scattered across the sky. Keanu listened with the kind of attention people rarely received. He didn't interrupt. He didn't guide her answers. He let her shape her world in her own words. She told him she loved vibrations in music more than anything because the vibrations made the world feel bigger and softer at the same time. She could feel music in her hands, her chest, even her feet. She could tell the difference between low notes and high ones not by pitch, but by how they settled inside her. He asked her what her dreams felt like. She said she dreamed by sound, not sight. Her dreams were full of wind voices, laughter, footsteps, rain, and music. She said sound made pictures in her mind more beautiful than anything she ever remembered seeing. Keanu listened, each word shaping a new understanding inside him. He had never met anyone who dreamed in sound, and he felt his heart change in ways he couldn't explain. Keanu remained crouched beside her, listening as she described her world. Every sentence she spoke revealed something quietly extraordinary about the way she navigated life. She wasn't simply adapting to blindness. She was translating the world into something she could still love. That moved him more than he expected. Mia shifted her weight slightly, brushing her fingers along her cane. "I used to look at the stars with my mom," she said. "I don't remember what they look like anymore, but I still think about them. I think they sound like tiny bells." She paused thoughtfully. "Or maybe like the wind when it's far away." Keanu smiled, though she couldn't see it. "That's beautiful," he said. "I never thought of stars that way." She tilted her head again, sensing the sincerity in his voice. "How do you see them?" He thought for a moment. "I see them as reminders," he answered, "that even when things feel dark, there's still something shining somewhere." Mia absorbed his words quietly. She didn't rush to respond. She simply nodded, letting the meaning rest inside her. Her breathing steadied, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a calm warmth. "I liked how your voice sounded," she whispered. "It felt safe." Keanu lowered his gaze. That word struck him deeply. Safe. A gift she rarely experienced in a world that often overwhelmed her senses. "I'm glad it felt that way," he said softly. They continued talking, their voices quiet and unhurried. She told him about how she listened to rainstorms to know the shape of the world. She described how walking through her apartment felt like reading a familiar story with her feet. And she shared how a good song made everything brighter, even when she couldn't see anything around her. Keanu listened as though he were hearing someone describe a new universe. Her world was smaller in some ways, yet deeper in others, and he felt humbled by the strength wrapped inside her gentle voice. After a few moments, he reached into his pocket. "Mia," he said softly, "I want to give you something." She froze, unsure. Keanu placed a small pendant in her hand. It was shaped like a tiny music note, warm from being held. She ran her fingers over it, exploring its edges with slow care. Then she found the small speaker embedded inside. "This is for you," Keanu explained. "There's a message recorded in it." She held it closer to her chest. "What does it say?" "It says," Keanu answered gently, "keep listening. You're stronger than you know." Mia's lips parted as emotion washed over her once more. She held the pendant tightly as if it were the most precious sound she had ever touched. The fundraiser ended long after Mia and Rachel had gone home, long after Keanu slipped quietly out the backstage door to avoid attention. The guests lingered in the hall, still talking softly about the moment they had witnessed. No one wanted to break the delicate glow that hung in the air. They walked to their cars in silence, carrying something warm and indescribable in their hearts. What no one realized was that one person had been working quietly throughout the evening. A volunteer photographer, a woman named Denise, had been assigned to capture the gala for the nonprofit's website. She hadn't taken out her phone. She hadn't recorded videos. She had only used her camera sparingly, respecting the atmosphere. But in the middle of the night, as she reviewed her gallery, her eyes froze on a single photograph. It was the moment. Keanu kneeling beside Mia, her face streaked with tears, both hands gripping the microphone like it was keeping her upright. Keanu leaning just close enough that she felt safe, his expression soft, almost fragile. No spotlight, no filters, just humanity suspended in a single frame. Denise covered her mouth with her hand. She knew immediately she had captured something rare, something honest, something the world needed to see. She sent the photo to Mr. Lawson with a note, "I hope we use this carefully." By morning, the image was on the nonprofit's official page with a simple caption about the fundraiser's success and a thank you to all supporters. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't emotional, it was respectful. But the internet works in its own way. A teacher from San Diego shared the image with the caption, "Keanu doesn't need a big stage. Just someone's heart needs him." That line struck a chord. Within an hour, the post had reached 1,000 shares. Within 2 hours, it climbed into the tens of thousands. By mid-morning, it had spread across platforms like ripples across calm water. It wasn't shared because Keanu Reeves was in it. It wasn't shared because a celebrity did something unusual. It was shared because it reminded people what human kindness looked like. No drama, no scandal, no branding, just a man kneeling beside a crying child, steadying her through the most emotional moment of her life. People reacted instantly. A mother wrote, "I lost my sight slowly too. This made me cry harder than I expected." A retired musician commented, "I've sung on many stages. This moment is bigger than all of them." A father added, "My son is blind. Thank you, Keanu, for seeing her." Thousands responded with their own stories of struggle, hope, healing, and unexpected kindness from strangers. The world didn't just go viral, it opened. The nonprofit's donation page, linked quietly beneath the original post, began receiving notifications. At first a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Some donations were small, some were large. Many came with notes like, "For Mia," or "Because kindness still matters," or "In honor of someone I love who can't see anymore." By noon, the fundraiser had already tripled its original goal. By evening, it quadrupled. Mr. Lawson stared at the dashboard in disbelief, wiping away tears he didn't try to hide. He called the staff together, his voice shaking as he read the messages aloud. The team cried with him, not because of the money alone, but because of the stories pouring in. People weren't just donating. They were reaching out, sharing pieces of themselves, creating a chain of empathy sparked by a single photograph. And somewhere in Los Angeles, completely unaware of the storm, his kindness had started. Keanu was quietly living his normal morning, having no idea the world had just changed. While the internet buzzed with emotion, Mia and Rachel sat together at their small kitchen table. Morning light filtered through the window, soft and warm. Mia held the music pendant in her hands, running her fingers over its smooth surface again and again. She pressed the tiny button and listened to Keanu's recorded message one more time. "Keep listening. You're stronger than you know." She smiled, not because of fame or recognition, but because someone had spoken directly to the part of her she guarded most carefully. Someone understood her world of sound, sensation, and hope. Someone had seen her without needing to see her. Rachel watched her daughter with a quiet heart. She had cried enough tears the night before to fill a lifetime. Now all she felt was gratitude. Gratitude for the moment. Gratitude for the kindness. Gratitude for a stranger who had treated her child not as a charity case, but as a person worthy of gentleness. She didn't know yet that the world was crying too. Meanwhile, at the nonprofit center, the staff began fielding calls from journalists, donors, teachers, parents, and advocates from across the country. Some wanted to share stories of their own children losing their sight. Others wanted to volunteer. Some asked how they could help families directly. No one asked for gossip. No one asked for behind-the-scenes drama. They just wanted to do something good. Mr. Lawson stepped into his office, overwhelmed and emotional. He stared at the photograph printed on his desk. Something about it felt healing in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't just a picture of a celebrity. It was a picture of courage, a picture of vulnerability, a picture of genuine connection between two people who shouldn't have crossed paths, but did at exactly the right moment. He whispered to himself, "This is why we do what we do." Across the city, Keanu finally saw the photo for the first time. A friend had sent it without comment, simply forwarding the image with a quiet acknowledgement of what the world was seeing. Keanu paused, studying the frozen moment. He remembered Mia's trembling shoulders, her whispered thank you, the way she held the microphone, like it was the last thread anchoring her emotions. He looked at the picture for a long time, not with pride, not with embarrassment, but with a soft ache. He hadn't expected anyone to capture the moment. He hadn't expected the world to notice, and yet somehow the world had seen exactly what he hoped Mia felt. The kindness was real. The morning after the fundraiser felt different for Mia. The world sounded brighter. Even the quiet carried a softness she hadn't noticed in a long time. She sat at the kitchen table with a warm cup of tea between her hands, the steam rising in gentle curls that she couldn't see but could feel. Rachel moved around the apartment quietly, giving her daughter space to settle inside the afterglow of what had happened. Mia traced her fingers along the pendant around her neck. She pressed the tiny button again, listening to Keanu's voice whisper through the speaker, "Keep listening. You're stronger than you know." Every time she heard the message, it felt like someone steady was standing beside her, someone who understood her world without trying to change it. She lifted the pendant to her lips for a moment, breathing in deeply. After a long pause, she said, "Mom, can I write him a letter?" Rachel slowed her steps. "A letter, yes," Mia said, "in Braille. I want him to know what it meant to me. I want him to know what I felt." Rachel's eyes warmed. "Of course you can." Mia reached for her Braille slate and stylus, the tools she used when she wanted her thoughts to feel real and permanent. She placed the slate on the table with practiced confidence. Her fingers hovered over the first line, and a small, thoughtful silence settled between them. Then she began. Each raised dot she pressed into the paper carried her feelings more honestly than spoken words ever could. She didn't rush. She let each sentence form slowly, where her heart guided it. When she finished, she asked quietly, "Can you read it back to me?" Rachel lifted the paper gently and ran her fingertips across the embossed dots, translating them smoothly. "Your voice made me feel like the world wasn't dark for a little while." Mia listened, her lips forming a small, fragile smile. "That's exactly what I wanted to say." Rachel folded the letter carefully. "Do you want me to mail it today?" Mia nodded. "Please." Later that afternoon, Rachel sent the letter through the nonprofit. She included a small note explaining that the message was meant for Keanu, with no expectation attached. No return address, no requests, no pressure. Just gratitude from a girl who had found a moment of light in the middle of darkness. Meanwhile, Keanu spent the morning in quiet reflection. He avoided the internet, choosing instead to take a long walk through the early streets of Los Angeles. His thoughts returned again and again to Mia, her trembling voice, her honesty, the way she held his sleeve backstage, the courage it took for her to speak her dream aloud. By late afternoon, he stopped by the nonprofit center. He didn't call ahead. He didn't want attention. He simply walked in and asked if there was anything they needed from him. Mr. Lawson greeted him with surprise, but with warmth too. After a brief conversation, he handed Keanu an envelope. "This came for you?" he said. "From Mia." Keanu held the letter gently, as though it were fragile. He didn't open it right away. He waited until he stepped outside, standing under the shade of a quiet tree. Then he unfolded the paper, staring at the raised dots with reverence. He couldn't interpret Braille by touch, but he still ran his fingers over the dots, learning their texture, as if touching the echo of her heartbeat. Keanu stood beneath the tree, the sounds of distant traffic humming softly around him. He held the Braille letter with both hands, feeling the raised dots beneath his fingertips, even though his touch couldn't translate them. Still, he traced the patterns slowly, carefully, as if the meaning lived in the texture itself. He didn't open the printed translation tucked behind it until he had allowed himself a full minute of silence. When he finally unfolded the typed copy, he read the single line over and over again. "Your voice made me feel like the world wasn't dark for a little while." He closed his eyes, inhaling slowly. The words settled inside him with a depth he rarely felt. It wasn't admiration, it wasn't celebrity attention, it was something purer. A connection made between two people who had shared a moment neither could recreate again. A moment that belonged only to the truth of what happened on that stage. Keanu rested his back against the tree, the letter held loosely in his hand. He felt humbled, grounded, and unexpectedly emotional. He thought about how fragile Mia's world must feel sometimes. He thought about her strength, her honesty, and the bravery she carried in her trembling shoulders when she spoke her dream aloud. He knew he needed to respond, but not with a public gesture, and not because the world was watching. This wasn't about cameras or headlines. It wasn't about being a celebrity. It was about something that had touched him deeper than anything he had experienced in a long time. He felt something real, and real things deserved real responses. "Do you think she'd want to see me again?" he asked quietly when he re-entered the building. Mr. Lawson looked at him with a soft smile. "I think she'd be over the moon, but only if you truly want to. No pressure." Keanu nodded. "I want to, as a friend." Mr. Lawson placed a respectful hand over his heart. "Then we'll make that happen." Later that evening, Keanu sat on his couch with the letter in his hands again. He kept running his fingers across the braille, learning its shape, even if he couldn't read it. Something about the dots made him feel closer to the girl who dreamed in sound. He imagined her writing it, her focused expression, her small hands pressing each message into the page. He whispered the line aloud to himself. The world wasn't dark for a little while. He felt the weight of those words, and he promised himself he would help her feel that light again, not as an actor, not as a public figure, but simply as someone who cared. Keanu arrived at the nonprofit center on a quiet afternoon, slipping through the side entrance the staff used. He had no desire to create attention. He didn't tell anyone he was coming besides Mr. Lawson, who greeted him with a respectful nod and a smile. The building felt peaceful, the kind of peaceful that came from soft voices and gentle hands guiding children who navigated the world differently. "She's in music therapy today," Mr. Lawson said quietly. "They're working on rhythm and vibration." Keanu nodded, feeling something warm settle inside him. He followed the hallway until the sound of soft percussion drifted toward him. Light taps, muted drums, faint vibrations moving through the floor. A therapist's voice guided the children, patiently encouraging them to touch the instruments, to feel the pulse through their fingertips. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching. Mia sat on a padded stool near a low table. Her cane rested beside her, unused during the lesson. She had one hand placed on a small drum, her fingers spread wide as she listened for vibration instead of sound. Her face carried a calm focus, the kind of concentration that came from deep listening. Keanu took one step into the room. One step was all it took. Mia's head lifted instantly. Her expression brightened with instant recognition. "You came back," she said, smiling. Keanu smiled too, feeling something inside him loosen. "Of course I did." The therapist stepped aside, recognizing the quiet connection between them. Keanu moved closer, kneeling so Mia could sense him without strain. She reached out lightly, tapping his elbow the same way she had during their backstage conversation. Her touch was gentle, confirming what her ears had already detected. "I knew it was you," she said proudly. "Your footsteps sound warm." Keanu let out a soft laugh. "I didn't know footsteps could sound warm." "They do," she replied. "Yours do." He didn't argue. There was no reason to. After a moment, she asked, "What are you holding?" Keanu lifted the bass case, still strapped around his shoulder. "I brought something we can play with, if you want." Mia's smile widened. "Yes, I want to feel it." They moved to a quiet corner of the room where a small rug muffled echoes. Keanu opened the case slowly, revealing his bass guitar. He placed it gently across his lap and tapped the wood so Mia would know where it was. She reached out with careful fingertips, tracing the smooth edges, the cool metal strings, the curve of the instrument's body. Keanu waited patiently until she finished exploring. Then he said, "Put your hand here." He guided her right hand to the top edge of the guitar. "You'll feel the vibration better." Mia placed her hand exactly where he instructed. Her fingers spread wide again, ready. Keanu plucked a single soft note. The vibration hummed gently beneath her palm. Her breath hitched in wonder. She leaned closer, pressing her hand more firmly onto the wood. He played another note slightly deeper this time. A soft gasp escaped her. This is what color must feel like." Keanu felt emotion rise sharply in his chest. "Color?" he asked softly. "Yes," she whispered. "If color made a feeling instead of a picture, this would be it." He swallowed hard, unable to reply. Her words went straight to a place he didn't know how to protect, and the afternoon had only just begun. Keanu continued playing soft notes, each one chosen with care. He wasn't trying to create a melody. He was creating a feeling, something she could hold in her hands. Mia kept her palm against the bass, absorbing each vibration as if it were a heartbeat. Every low note pulsed warmly through her fingers, and every higher note fluttered lightly against her skin. "This one feels like yellow," she said suddenly. Keanu paused, surprised. "Yellow," she nodded. "It feels bright, like when someone laughs." He smiled even though she couldn't see it. "And this one." He plucked a deeper note. She tilted her head. "Blue. Not sad blue. Calm blue." He played again, shifting slightly lower. "What about that?" Mia hesitated for a long moment. "This one feels like night, quiet and soft." Keanu closed his eyes. Her descriptions made the music feel new to him, reshaping sounds into emotions, emotions into textures. She wasn't just hearing music, she was interpreting it in a way that made the world larger, not smaller. He played a gentle, rhythmic pattern next, letting the notes move like slow waves. Mia placed her other hand on the body of the bass, wanting to feel more of its surface. She leaned closer, her expression filled with wonder, her small shoulders relaxing as she sank into the experience. "This one feels like home," she said. "It feels safe." Keanu swallowed hard. He didn't trust his voice yet, so he kept playing. The room around them grew quiet. Even the therapist watched from a distance, moved by the connection unfolding between the two. When the last vibration faded, Mia kept her hands on the instrument for a few seconds longer before letting go. She looked toward the sound of Keanu's breath. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming back, for letting me feel the music. I didn't think I'd get to have a moment like this twice." Keanu rested the bass across his lap and exhaled slowly. "I didn't come back because I had to," he said gently. "I came back because I wanted to. Being here with you, it reminded me why kindness matters, why small things matter." Mia reached out again, touching his arm lightly. "It wasn't small to me." He felt those words settle deep inside his chest. "I know," he replied softly. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking in the corner of the room. Mia told him about her music therapy sessions, how she could tell different instruments apart by the shape of their vibrations. She described how walking down a hallway felt different, depending on whether it echoed or stayed still. She even told him she wanted to learn how to play something one day, even if she couldn't see the instrument. Keanu listened with full attention. Every word she spoke, every laugh she shared, made the room lighter. By the time he stood to leave, his heart felt different, fuller, steadier, reminded of a truth he had always believed, but sometimes forgot. Kindness wasn't a gesture, it was a way of living, and Mia had brought that truth back to him. The morning after the fundraiser, Los Angeles woke up to a single photograph that seemed to soften the entire world. No videos, no dramatic angles, just a still image capturing one fragile, perfect moment, Keanu kneeling beside Mia as she clutched the microphone with trembling hands. Her face was lifted toward him, streaked with tears. His posture was protective and gentle, as if he were shielding her from the weight of the world. The light overhead fell in a soft halo around them, giving the photo a quiet sacredness that no editing could manufacture. Within minutes, the image spread across social media, not through fan accounts or gossip sites, but through everyday people who saw something in the picture that felt rare. It wasn't about fame, it wasn't about celebrity, it was about compassion made visible. A still frame that captured what kindness looked like in its purest, simplest form. The online reaction was immediate. People wrote about their own struggles, their own children with disabilities, their own moments of unexpected mercy. The photo became a symbol people needed, especially in a world that too often felt loud, divided, and exhausted. Users reposted it with captions like, "This is what humanity should look like, and compassion doesn't need a spotlight." Within hours, reporters began searching for more information. Articles appeared with headlines trying to explain the moment, but no one had the full story. The nonprofit center refused to comment. The staff insisted on protecting the privacy of every child involved. That silence stirred curiosity, but also respect from many people who were tired of seeing vulnerable stories turned into clickbait. By afternoon, journalists began reaching out to Rachel Harper. Some were polite, some were persistent. All wanted interviews, details, or quotes about her daughter and the mysterious song Keanu had sung on stage. Rachel read the messages with a mix of unease and determination. Her daughter's moment had been pure, personal, and intimate. It wasn't meant to become a headline. She answered each request the same way. "Thank you for your interest, but our family chooses privacy." She didn't elaborate. She didn't offer a promise for the future. She simply protected Mia the same way she always had, with a calm firmness that left no door open. Her refusal frustrated several media outlets, but it impressed the public. Comment sections filled with people praising her decision. They admired a mother who wouldn't use her daughter's vulnerability for publicity or sympathy. They admired a family who didn't rush to capitalize on the moment. And most of all, they admired the dignity with which everything was handled. The nonprofit center released a brief message confirming the fundraiser's success and expressing gratitude. They made no mention of Keanu. They did not describe the performance. They did not explain what had happened on stage. They preserved the privacy of every person involved, even as public interest surged. Finally, as the story continued to circulate, Keanu Reeves issued a single statement through his publicist. Not an interview, not a press conference, just a simple sentence written with the quiet clarity that defined him. No child's moment of healing needs to be turned into content. That sentence spread faster than the photo. It struck a chord so deep that people reposted it endlessly. In a culture obsessed with recording everything, with turning even pain into entertainment, his words felt like a gentle but powerful reminder of boundaries, of respect, of human depth. The world admired him more, not because he was famous, but because he refused to exploit his own kindness. For many, the statement became a kind of shield against the noise of the internet. People shared stories of moments they wished had remained private, moments that lost their purity once cameras got involved. Others simply wrote that they felt grateful to see someone choosing compassion over attention. Interesting things began happening online. Arguments softened. People offered more empathy in comment sections. Strangers thanked each other for sharing vulnerable stories. In small but noticeable ways, the world felt different. All because of one moment on a small stage. One song sung quietly. One child who asked for something almost impossible. One man who said yes without expecting anything in return. The original photo took on a life of its own. For some, it represented hope. For others, it represented the beauty of gentleness in a time when gentleness was rare. And for a surprising number of people, it became a reminder that fame didn't have to harden a person's heart. As the photo continued to circulate, news outlets tried to reshape the moment into a narrative they could control. Some speculated about what Mia had asked for. Others guessed which song Keanu had sung. A few insisted the performance must have been filmed somewhere. But each time a rumor surfaced, it faded quickly. People began correcting reporters themselves, reminding them that the beauty of the moment was its privacy. The public unexpectedly defended the boundary that Keanu and Rachel had both created. Parents of visually impaired children commented beneath the original post, writing about how rare it was to see their kids represented without pity. Volunteers shared stories about the fundraiser's mission. Musicians wrote about how a single song offered gently and quietly could transform a person's entire outlook. One artist sketched the now famous image. Another turned it into a soft watercolor. A poet uploaded a short verse inspired by the photo. None of it was commercial. None of it felt opportunistic. It was as if people simply needed to express the emotion the picture stirred inside them. Meanwhile, Mia had no idea any of this was happening. Her mother kept the online frenzy away from her intentionally. She wanted Mia to remember the night for what it truly was, not for how the world viewed it. Just a girl standing on a stage, hearing her hero sing just for her. At the nonprofit center, staff members printed out emails from donors who were inspired by the story. Not one asked for a photo or a detail about the song. They gave because they felt moved. They gave because something in that moment reminded them of kindness they once received or kindness they once withheld. The photograph and the quiet truth behind it became a symbol, not of celebrity, not of charity, but of gentleness in a world that rarely slows down enough to show it. The weeks following the fundraiser felt strangely quiet for Mia and Rachel. The world around them continued buzzing with conversations about the viral photograph, but inside their small apartment, life returned to its gentle rhythm. Mornings began with the soft stirring of oatmeal on the stove, the tapping of Mia's cane along the hallway, and the comforting sounds she relied on to shape her understanding of the space around her. Though her vision continued fading into deeper grayness, her spirit felt lighter than it had in months. One evening, Rachel received a call from the nonprofit center. She almost didn't answer, thinking it might be another reporter trying to bypass her silence. But the caller ID showed the center's number, so she picked up. The voice that greeted her belonged to Mr. Lawson, the director of the center, and he spoke in a tone softer than usual, almost reverent. He asked if she had a moment to talk. Rachel stepped into the kitchen, glancing toward the living room, where Mia sat cross-legged on the carpet, gently running her fingers across the tiny speaker pendant Keanu had given her. The recorded message inside remained her favorite thing in the world. She played it every night before bed, holding it close to her heart as if it were a shield against darkness. When Rachel said she could talk, Mr. Lawson took a quiet breath before explaining the purpose of the call. A major donor, he said, had stepped forward to fund Mia's upcoming experimental treatments. Every consultation, every therapy session, every piece of specialized equipment she might need. The donor insisted on remaining anonymous. Their contribution had been processed through a third-party foundation, so no personal name would ever appear. It was enough to cover many months of therapy that Rachel had been terrified she wouldn't be able to afford. Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth as emotion surged through her. Her knees weakened. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, gripping the phone tighter. For a moment she couldn't speak. Gratitude mingled with disbelief. Relief tangled with the deeper weight of responsibility. She thanked him repeatedly, her voice shaking with each word. But before the call ended, Mr. Lawson hesitated. He explained that although the donor wished to remain anonymous to the outside world, the foundation had instructed him to tell Rachel privately who had initiated the contribution. It was her choice, he said, whether she wanted to share the information with Mia or keep it between them. And it was entirely her choice whether she ever wanted to share it with the person responsible. He spoke the name gently. Rachel closed her eyes, letting the truth rest inside her like a warm light. She whispered, "Thank you," and hung up the phone. For several long moments, she sat in silence, letting the truth settle into her bones. She pressed both hands against her chest as tears filled her eyes, heavier and deeper than before. Not from sorrow, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that the kindness they had felt from Keanu that night had not ended on that stage. It had continued quietly, deliberately, with no desire for acknowledgement or praise. She wiped her eyes and walked toward the living room, Her steps were slow, thoughtful, almost reverent. Mia sat on the carpet, listening to the gentle hum of the pendant. She turned her head toward the sound of her mother's footsteps and smiled instinctively the way she always did when she sensed her mother's presence. Rachel sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She held her daughter close, savoring the steady rhythm of her breathing. For a moment, she didn't speak. She simply allowed herself to feel everything to gather the right words. Finally, when she felt steady enough, she whispered, "Sweetheart, I have something important to tell you." Mia tilted her head, listening more deeply than most people ever could. "Is it about the treatment?" she asked. Rachel nodded, though she remembered Mia couldn't see the gesture. So she answered softly, "Yes, the therapy is happening. We can start next week." Mia gasped quietly. Her fingers tightened around the pendant. She whispered, "Really? We can afford it." Rachel swallowed hard, emotion tightening her throat. "Yes," she said, "because someone helped us." Mia touched the floor lightly, grounding herself, as she always did when emotions grew too big. Her voice trembled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Who helped us, Mom?" Rachel hesitated. The truth rested heavily on her tongue. It wasn't the kind of truth you rushed. It was something you placed gently, like a fragile object in a child's hands. She breathed in slowly, steadying herself before speaking. "It was Keanu," she whispered. He paid for everything, quietly, anonymously. He didn't want anyone to know." For a moment, Mia froze. Her hands stopped moving. Even her breaths seemed to pause. Then the smallest, softest sound escaped her lips. Not a sob, not a gasp. Just a quiet exhale, like her heart had finally released something it had been holding for too long. She lifted the pendant in her hands and held it against her cheek. "He didn't have to," she whispered. "He already gave me everything I dreamed of." Rachel felt tears spill again, tracing warm paths down her face. She placed her hand gently over Mia's, the one holding the pendant. "Sometimes the people who have the least reason to give the most," she murmured. Mia leaned into her mother's arms, her voice tight but full of something new. Not sorrow, not fear, something brighter. "Mom, does this mean my vision could stop getting worse?" "It means we have a real chance," Rachel said. "A chance we didn't have before." Mia cried, then soft, shaking tears that carried relief instead of grief. Rachel held her close, rubbing her back in slow circles, the way she had since Mia was little. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't walking into it alone. Hope, once faint and fragile, now felt steady. Keanu's kindness had given them more than treatment. He had given them time, a chance, a path forward. And Mia whispered through her tears, "I can't wait to tell him thank you." Months passed, and the world outside Mia's apartment moved on with its usual rhythm. Seasons shifted, school sessions changed. People online found new stories to talk about, new moments to share. But inside the Harper home, something still glowed softly like a warm lantern that never burned out. Mia carried a new steadiness in her heart, shaped by music, by kindness, and by the quiet reassurance that someone out there believed she was worth fighting for. Her treatments were difficult at times. Some days brought headaches that made sharp noises overwhelming. Other days brought fatigue that made getting out of bed a challenge. But the therapy slowed the deterioration. Her doctors were encouraged, her mother was hopeful, and Mia herself, for the first time in years, felt the world wasn't closing around her as quickly as before. Every night before bed, she sat on her pillow and held her pendant gently in her palm. She pressed the small button, and the familiar voice played in the softest whisper. "Keep listening. You're stronger than you know." She knew the recording by heart, but she never grew tired of hearing it. To her, it wasn't just sound. It was a promise, a memory wrapped in warmth, a reminder that even in darkness, something beautiful had reached her, touched her, lifted her. She called it the memory that sings. Sometimes she played the message twice, sometimes 3 times, but always quietly, as if she wanted to keep the moment intimate and sacred. It was the only recording she played with full attention, her breathing going still as she let the sound settle into her chest. It felt like listening to a star pulse, even though she couldn't see one. One evening, after a long day at the center, Rachel suggested they step outside for fresh air. The night sky stretched above them, dark and quiet, the kind of sky filled with thousands of distant lights. Mia couldn't see the stars, but she lifted her chin anyway, imagining them as bright spots she could feel rather than view. She stood silently on the small patch of grass outside their building, letting the breeze brush against her cheeks. She listened to the wind move through the leaves, the soft hum of a passing car, the distant laughter from neighbors. Every sound blended gently, forming a world she understood. Not with her eyes, but with something deeper. Rachel stood beside her, watching her daughter's peaceful expression. She didn't interrupt. She knew Mia needed these moments, moments where the world wasn't trying to measure her abilities or define her limits, but simply existing with her. After a long, quiet pause, Mia whispered, "Mom, sometimes I pretend the wind is singing." Rachel smiled. "What does it sound like to you?" Mia tilted her head, listening more closely. "Light," she said softly, "like the kind of light I imagined stars would make if they had voices." Rachel felt a lump rise in her throat. She knelt beside her daughter and held her hand gently. Mia squeezed it back, grounding herself in the warmth of her mother's presence. The pendant hung around Mia's neck, resting against her chest. She touched it with her free hand, brushing her thumb across the smooth metal. "I can't see the sky," she whispered, "but I can hear the world." Rachel nodded. "And you hear it beautifully." Mia breathed in slowly, letting the cool night air settle inside her. Every sound felt clearer, softer, more meaningful. She thought of the stage, the microphone, the trembling in her hands, and Keanu's voice, quiet, hesitant, but full of truth. She thought about how his song had reached her in ways sight never could. She thought about how his kindness didn't end that night. It continued like an echo she could carry with her. And as she stood under the unseen stars, she whispered words she had been holding in her heart for months. "Thank you for letting me hear something beautiful." Mia stayed outside longer than usual, letting the night wrap around her like a soft blanket. The breeze shifted directions, and she followed its movement, with her ears smiling at how alive the world sounded when she gave it her full attention. Every faint rustle felt like a secret. Every low vibration felt like a heartbeat. She didn't need the stars to see beauty. She could hear it. Rachel watched her silently, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and awe. There was something about her daughter's resilience that always left her humbled. Even with the weight of her illness, even with the shadows creeping slowly over her vision, Mia found a way to experience the world that was full of meaning. It wasn't the way others did, but it was hers, and she lived it with a grace beyond her 12 years. After a moment, Rachel whispered, "Do you think you'll ever tell him how much his song meant to you?" Mia turned her face toward the sound of her mother's voice. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Sometimes, when I think about saying it out loud, it feels too big, too important, like I'll say it wrong." Rachel brushed a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "I don't think you could ever say it wrong." Mia smiled softly. "Maybe one day." She reached for her pendant again. "For now, I think he already knows. Not because anyone told him, but because I felt it when he sang. Like he meant every word." The wind carried a soft hum through the branches. Mia listened as if the world itself were encouraging her. She let her fingers trace the pendant once more before lowering her hand gently. The moment settled into quiet. Not empty quiet, but full quiet, the kind that held emotion instead of space. Mia breathed it in and felt something shift inside her, a sense of peace, a sense of closure, and a sense of beginning all at once. One gentle act had changed her world. One voice had become a memory she would carry for the rest of her life. And the echo of that kindness still lived inside her, steady and warm.